Hey, my name is Sam. I am the youth middle pastor at Fort Smith campus, and I just want to say thanks so much for being a part of this devotional. I think it's amazing, and we're in the series of Jonah. If you have not watched the previous ones, please do so. Do that first, and I tell you what, if you've watched them, don't judge me too hard, right? Like, those guys are the pros. I love what they're being able to communicate, and you're gonna gain so much from that. But we've left off in this series, right, where with chapter 1, and we see Jonah is thrown overboard. He's in the sea and he's in a storm. And so right off the bat, I just want to point us to truth number 1 in this, is that everyone faces storms. Everyone faces storms. Pastor Marcus says it this way: you're either going into a storm, you're in a storm, or you're just getting out of a storm. And Jesus says the same thing. Is John 16:33 says this: I've told you these things so that in me you may have peace. He said, in this world, there's 2 promises. Number 1, you will have trouble. Number 2 is to take heart, for I've overcome the world. The truth is, we just live in a world where you're gonna find yourself in a storm in life. Here's the thing about storms: I love them. They're so cool, because when you're in a storm, like, it's hard to not be just encapsulated in the moment, because all you can see is the storm, like the lightning or the waves or the wind whipping through trees. It's just like, it's like surrounding you, and all you can hear is storms are loud. And the other thing is that you just feel it. Sometimes all you can feel is the storm, and it's the same thing with the storms in our lives as well. In fact, if I'm gonna just be honest with you, this year has been the most difficult year of my life. January 16th, I found out that my dad had cancer. It just took us all by surprise. He was super healthy. He was 68. He was still pretty young, and within 2 months, he ended up passing away. We were saying goodbye to him, and the rest of the year just kind of felt like a storm. Like, just as all, not just grief, but just life felt like a storm. And I don't know what your storm is. I don't know if everywhere you look you see grief or unpaid bills, or you see a broken relationship. I don't know if all that you're hearing is the echoes of a diagnosis, or a boss telling you that you're no longer needed at your job. I don't know what you're hearing or what you're feeling. Grief, anxiety. I just know that we in this life will find ourselves in storms. And so I want to give you encouragement, and it's this. Number 1, we all face storms, but number 2 is this: that God hears you. Like, God hears you. Jonah 2 verse 1 says this: from the inside the fish, Jonah prayed to the Lord, and he said, in my distress, I called to the Lord, and he answered me. From the deep, in the realm of the dead, I called for help, and you listened to my cry. And aren't you glad that we serve a God that doesn't have bad cell service, right? Like, it doesn't matter how far you go. In fact, David said this in Psalm 139. It's like, where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. You're never too far from God. There's no storm that's gonna separate you from him. And when he listens, he hears us. But the question is, are you calling out to him? Because a lot of times in a storm, we hear it, we see it, we feel it, and we try to distract our eyes with anything that'll take our mind off the storm, or we try to listen and drown out with voices to try to distract us from the storm, or we just try to feel anything but the storm. But I just want to encourage you, like, there is no greater thing that we can do than to call out to God, and He hears us. And the last thing is God helps. Like, Jonah's in the middle of the sea being pulled under by the current, right? It says, and the waves were too much and the current pulls him under, and he's getting sucked, he says, into the pit of the sea. And like, it's hopeless. But we serve a God that doesn't have the word impossible in his vocabulary. And so what does he do? He sends a big giant fish. And it's amazing. Like, he's so creative, he's so capable. But I sometimes think, like, God, why didn't, the storm was calm, why didn't you just send like the ship, like the ship that just turn around and be like, hey, thanks for jumping in and calming the storm, and like, you want to hitch a ride? I don't know, maybe like Nineveh? Like, that to me makes the most sense. But God, in his creativity and his goodness, he didn't do that. And so I just want to encourage you with this. If you're in a storm, and it feels like the provision God is giving you, like there's pain in it, that process that you're going through, there's pain in it, just be encouraged with this, that just because there's pain in the process doesn't mean there's not a plan. Like, God's got this, and just because there's pain in the process doesn't mean there's not a purpose. So be encouraged that if you're in a storm, God hears you, God helps. And if you are not in a storm, if you are blessed to be in a season of just like being out of a storm and you've been through some stuff, I just want to encourage you with this. If God can use a big giant fish, God can use you. So maybe your prayer today is not a prayer of crying out to God for help, but maybe it's, how can I help? Who do you want to point me to encourage? Thank you so much for taking the time to dive into God's word, be a part of this devotional, and being the church. Pray that you're encouraged. Have a good one.